Hi, welcome back to the channel. So today I have a repair video on the Million Mile Accord. This video is going to be applicable specifically to 2003 through 2007 Honda Accords. That's the 7th generation. May also be similar for other Hondas as well. So on a recent trip I just completed, I noticed that the lower ball joints in the front were starting to make some noise. Some indications of potential lower ball joint failure could be going over bumps and hearing like a knocking sound from the front end, or like a rattle from the front end. Rattles and knocks could also be other issues as well, but that's one of the signs for the lower ball joints. Another one would be pulling into or out of your garage or a parking spot when you're turning the wheel. If you hear like a rattling sound, like a creaking or a clanking sound, that can be signs of impending ball joint failure. So this is very important on these cars because the way they're designed, if the ball joints snap, it'll kick the front wheel out and then it's going to rest the car on the ground. So if you've ever been driving down the road before, seen a Honda on the ground with the front wheel kind of kicked out at the bottom, that was the lower ball joint that failed. Also very important on these cars, I strongly recommend that you spend the money on the OEM lower ball joints. There's numerous stories online of failures of aftermarket lower ball joints, specifically Moog. And I'm not a Moog hater by any means. I've used Moog suspension parts in other applications, but the front lower ball joints for these cars, the design's just different than the OEM design, and it causes problems, and I'll try to show you that in a little bit. So in this video, I'm going to kind of walk you through the steps of how to replace the front lower ball joints. It's a little bit of a job. It normally takes me about 3 to 3.5 hours, I'd say, for the front, for both sides, but it can be done. So I'm going to show you the steps for that. All right, first off, let's do a mileage check on the car. Okay, there you go. 1,060,711 miles. So the last time I did the ball joints was around 948,000. So I was hoping that I was going to get some more life out of these things, but it's time to change them. Okay, so before I show you the parts here, I wanted to show you something in the Haynes manual. So this is my repair manual for the car. Okay, when you look up ball joints in here, ball joint replacement, I wanted to point out this sentence right here. It says the ball joints are not serviceable separately and require replacement of the upper control arm. That would be for the front upper ball joints, but we're doing the lower, or the steering knuckle in the event of ball joint failure. So the lower ball joints are at the bottom of the steering knuckle. And it says check with your parts store, dealer, okay, before disassembling. So the book says it's not serviceable, but they actually are, and I've done it before, and that's specifically why I decided to make this video. Okay, so like I said, strongly recommend going with OEM lower ball joints for this. So here's the new set I got. There's the part number. This is for my 2003 Honda Accord Coupe, the 6.6 V6 6-speed. All right, so the design here, see how this is smooth? I actually have a Moog, or a set of Moog lower ball joints right here. I had a shop replace these the first time, and they used Moog. Okay, so right here you see Moog Problem Solver. You see the difference here? See this rib circumference? Okay, so these things are junk. I actually need to take these couple back to the company and let them, get the money back or use it in another car if they want. I will never install Moog lower ball joints in my car again. These ribs right here, so they installed those. These things failed within, it was something ridiculous, like 30,000 miles. It was not long at all. And so when I went, so I had them replace them first time, and then they failed after about 30,000 miles. They did it again under warranty, and then they failed again in about the same amount of time. And so at that point I said, okay, I'm done. I'm going to do it myself. And so I got OEM lower ball joints and put these in. They lasted for quite a while, but the problem was this ribbed edge here, or rib circumference, had worked the hole open in the lower part of the knuckle wide enough to where this pressed in okay initially, but then after some usage, the ball joint actually started kind of coming up and down out of the knuckle. And so not only did I have to replace the ball joints again, but I also had to replace the knuckles. I had to get some knuckles off of a salvage car to put in my car. So we're going to replace the OEM ones that are in there with another set of OEM, but I wanted to specifically show the difference between these. So these will damage your knuckle, and then you'll have to replace the entire knuckle in order to make it work. Okay, so otherwise, I've got these two kits here. These are from my local Advanced Auto Parts store, just rental tool kits. Power Built kit number 46, the ball joint and U-joint service kit. So this is the press with all the associated attachments we're going to use to press the ball joints in and out. And then there's also a little Honda specific kit. The last time I did this, the only thing I needed from this one, I believe, was just this little plate here. So that's why I got that one. But we're going to go ahead and get the front end off the ground and get the wheels off and start taking it apart. Okay, next I'm going to unstake the CV axle nut right here. And then we'll do that. Okay, so these nuts are torqued down to, if I remember correctly, it's 181 foot-pounds. I've got it in the Haynes manual over there. So pretty high amount of torque. So you've got a couple of different options here. If you still have the donut spare, what you can do is you can put this wheel back on here, put the car back down on the ground, and then the resistance of the tire sitting against the pavement, you can get through here with your socket and pull it off. However, I'm going to use my rigid half-inch drive impact, which is going to just laugh at this thing and pull it right off. This is a 36 millimeter socket for this. The mounting bolts for the caliper are 17 mil. Okay, so I was going to show you this ABS sensor. I got a lot more light on it now. So from this perspective, coming inside, and then you see right here, there's a little 10 mil right there. So I'm going to take that out. I should be able to wiggle the sensor out, and then I'm going to take off the, there's a bolt right there, and that's going to pull this whole wire loose off the knuckle. For people that are in rust-prone areas, you may not be able to remove this from down here. You may need to get up into the inner fender well and disconnect the wire from the harness like that, but I should be able to pull mine out like this. So I'm gonna get that done and pull off over here. These two bolts, they're, like I said, oh, that's 10 mil, and then I'll get the caliper removed here. Okay, so I got this broke loose. It's hard to see this with the light there too, but just a little wiggle there, and then it should pull out. There we go. There's the sensor. Okay, so I'm going to take all that and hang it off to the side. All right, for the brake caliper, got one mounting bolt up here, one down below, and then the two that connect the bracket to the knuckle that holds the hose there. So I'm going to get all those off now. Okay, so I got this bracket loose. I got the two caliper mounting bolts out of the back here. Just gonna pull the caliper off and probably stow it in there for now. Okay, so next I'm going to remove the through bolt for the fork from the strut. Right here is the end of the ball joint. Ball joint's right there. So I'm going to take that cotter pin out and take the castle key nut off the bottom there. Okay, so the through bolt for the fork strut is 17 on both ends. Tap. Okay, something else I'm going to do is remove this pinch bolt here. This is the 14 mil, and that's going to allow this bottom fork for the strut to come down. There we go. Okay. All right, so I'll get the bottom nut out of the ball joint here, and I might actually use a pickle fork because I'm not worried about damaging these on the way out. Okay, so now I'm going to take the upper ball joint loose right here. I've got a little 3/8 impact gun, also rigid brand. I'm going to do that, and then the Kessel key nut from the ball joint down there. So leave that nut on there so I can tap it to break it loose. Just use the ratchet on this. Alright, so tap this loose. Okay, so a few gentle taps of the hammer up here popped it loose. Okay. Okay, so with the upper ball joint loose, I was able to get the CV axle pulled out of the hub. I'm going to work on separating that. Then we'll have to pull this little trim ring out right here, and then the ball joint will press out and the new one will press in. Okay, so let me get caught up on stuff. I ended up using a pickle fork, so put a pickle fork in there to pop the ball joint out, and then went ahead and disconnected the tie rod end as well, the outer tie rod end. So kind of the same as the bottom of the ball joint, had a cotter pin in there, castle key nut, so I got that out of the way. So now I'm going to take the knuckle out and we'll go ahead and replace the ball joint on the workbench with the press. Here's the knuckle on the workbench. So I need to get the little trim ring out here. Now there's a notch in it for where the sensor goes. So I need to get that out of the way so I can press the ball joint out. This ball joint actually doesn't feel too terribly bad. The other side is where my noise and creaking seem to be coming from, so I'm expecting the passenger side to be a lot worse. But either way, they're getting replaced. Okay, so here's the setup I'm using to push the old ball joint out. So I've got the top of the knuckle held in my bench vise. This cup is bigger than the ball joint, so it's going to let it slide into it. And then I've got this around the ball joint for stabilization, and the threaded piece is going down into a hole between, inside there to push the ball joint out. All right, for installation, I've got a flat piece up here that's going to push on the top part of the ball joint. And then this is an open sleeve, and this is a cap on the end. And so as I tighten down the threaded rod, it's going to pull this back this way. Okay, tighten until it's fully seated. Okay, so here you see I use that cup to push down on the top of the ball joint. This was the open sleeve, and then that was a piece on the end of it so the threaded rod or threaded end could go through there. Now all that's left to do is to put the little trim ring in back here. Put the little notch where the ABS sensor goes through. I'm just going to tap that back into place, and then this thing's going to be ready to go back in the car. I'm going to put a little grease in here for the splines of the CV axle. Okay, so set the knuckle back in place. I'm going to go ahead and reattach everything. You see the CV axles push through there. I reattach everything, and then I'm going to load the suspension before I torque everything down to spec. Okay, so I got the fork for the strut back in place. There's a little notch on the back of the strut where the split on the fork has to feed up into, so I've got that pushed up all the way. Pinch bolts in there. Gonna tighten that down, and then I'll put the through bolt down there at the bottom. Okay, let's get you caught up. So I put the ABS sensor down in the little hole for it. I've got the 10mm bolt cinched down. Got the bracket attached up here with the 10 mil. 17 for the outer tie rod end. I got it cinched down right now. Down underneath the ball joint stud, got 17 cinched down. I'm going to put the rotor back on here, bring the caliper over, bolt the caliper down, bolt the hose to the knuckle here. Got the upper on there. I need to get it cinched down a little bit. And then once all that is reasonably tight, then I'm going to go ahead and load the suspension and then torque everything down to spec. Okay, I have the suspension loaded up now. Got my second jack underneath the lower control arm. Got exerting pressure on this to load the suspension up. Now it's time to torque everything back down to spec. So it's going to be a little hard to do and hold the camera here, so I'm not sure how much of this I'll be able to shoot. Okay, the pinch bolt for the strut fork is 32 foot-pounds, so I've got that dialed up right now. There we go. Tie rod end nut is 33. The upper ball joint nut is 35. The manual said 29 to 35, so I just went to 35 on that one. Lower through bolt for the strut is 47. The lower ball joint nut is 58 to 65, so I'll go ahead and go to 65 on it. Brake caliper bolts are 80. Okay, now I have to get the big torque wrench out for the CV axle nut, but everything else is torqued down. And I'll have to add the cotter pins to the tie rod end and the ball joint. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier with the donut spare. So on my manual transmission car with both tires off the ground, if I try to torque this down, it's just going to spin. So I've put on the donut spare and I've got it down on the ground there. You can see a few lug nuts holding it together. If you have a 4-cylinder automatic, it's 134 foot-pounds. However, if you have a manual transmission 4-cylinder or a V6, it's 181 foot-pounds. So it's a big difference, so make sure you get it right. There we go, 181. Okay, so put the side back in the air and then put the regular wheel on it, torque it down to 80 foot-pounds for the lug nuts, and this side will be done. Okay, before I put the rim on there, I'm going to stake this back down. There's a little notch in the CV axle. You're just trying to push this part of the CV axle nut down into that notch. That's plenty. All right. That's it for this side.